Hi, you guys. I'm here with Paul from Distant Origins. He's got a YouTube channel. He's a researcher and he's into like cool stuff as well. I don't know. Would you call yourself a researcher? Is that how we're going to describe you?
I suppose so. Although I know a lot of the people we tend to hang around and talk to, they kind of like dive in head first into everything, whereas my approach is simply I read all the mainstream stuff, and occasionally I'll come across something where I just look at it and go, "That doesn't make any sense," and then that's what I tend to focus on. I also tend to like mythology, so a lot of my research goes by mostly Norse mythology, but there's also Far Eastern mythology, which I'm interested in as well.
Very cool. Yeah, so you just started your YouTube channel like this year, right? And
Yeah.
so what's your like I've seen a lot of the Tower series that you just finished about the Jericho Towers and things, which we can get into in a second. But like, what's your intention? What's your spin? Like, what do you want to start doing more and more stuff of?
Mostly trying to create kind of like a timeline of human history, one that takes in all the evidence, because of course the mainstream seems to miss out on a lot of this evidence, which doesn't fit the profile that they've already created. They sometimes extend that profile a little bit, but they don't actually change anything. And a lot of the evidence that I find out there just doesn't seem to match up to it, such as the towers in Jericho. And that's my overall aim. I'm trying to look at all these different areas, whether it's mythological or archaeology, and put it in a time frame that works so you can actually see the evolution of civilization through till the present day.
So when we look at the mythological stuff, have you looked into the whole oh, what's that? The Kensington runestone stuff and a lot of the Norse mythology stuff about how they basically colonized. Well, I guess they did colonize technically North America first. Well, actually not first because there were natives there already. So yeah, like that's it's interesting that we even try to think of it that way. But um yeah, like so you said you really like the Norse mythology, like the Thor stuff, right? So um
Yeah,
I like that stuff too. I've read a lot of their mythology and I really like it. So what do you make of all these things? Like all these I when I start thinking about you got like your Norse mythology, your Greek mythology, your your Bible stuff, your all this stuff. And I wonder like how much of it is rooted in I mean, basically, they all have like these giant personalities, right? And maybe they all have giants. Like, that's what I kind of always end up going into. So, what do you think about all that?
most of the European ones do, yes. Strange thing is that they don't tend to get like as far back as you can go with Norse mythology. Everyone knows it for such as your giants and the little people.
Oh, yeah, the elves,
This is what happens when I come to dwarfs.
dwarfs.
Oh, I hate working nights. It really messes up my head. Anyway, yeah, the dwarfs and the giants, they don't seem to exist really. The further back you go in Norse mythology, those names were added later on, almost about the time that Christianity started to spread.
Hmm.
They were actually viewed very much the same as the Norse gods. It were like different families of gods instead. So originally, that's why a lot of the mythological stories, such as where Thor is hunting the world serpent, and he's in a boat with a giant. And in other stories, the giants are just simply enormous. Thor could basically climb on top of their foot. They're that big. But here
Right.
he is in a boat with a giant, and they're basically about the same size. And the thinking behind it is that the idea of giants and the dwarves came later. That originally all these people were judged to be pretty much the same people, and then it just evolved over a period of about 1,000 years, roughly.
I find it really interesting that, like, I when I visited Sweden and stuff, like it's very sanitized. They don't have, I mean, they don't really seem to have a lot of their megalithic sites or anything like that. Like there's not a lot of old ruins.
Yeah, I think there could be a reason for that. Again, going back to mythology, if you look at the construction of Asgard, um, it seems to be implying, it doesn't state it outright, but it seems to be implying that the Norse gods, Thor, Odin, and the like, they were mostly building out of wood. Their stone wall was actually supposedly built by a giant. So it made me think that maybe that was one of the key differences, that you actually had people who were building out of wood and other materials, and you had your stone workers, and that had actually fit because, of course, we know that you've got such as Göbekli Tepe, which was being built out of stone. So it could be that where this mythology evolved from was at the point where you had the builders of places like Göbekli Tepe building out of rock, and the so-called Asgardian gods building out of wood.
Yeah,
So
and
that could explain why you don't have much in the way of ruins in north areas.
yeah, that does make a lot of sense too. I mean, I know they have a few kind of like more circular stuff, but I mean, I also think that they're a lot of their old forests don't even exist. They've been like replanted and so yeah, that's kind of interesting. Okay, so but I have watched a lot of stuff on like the Icelandic people and their belief in elves and all that.
Yeah.
That's kind of cute. Okay, so
Oh yeah, I absolutely adore their mythology. It's just wondrous. No wonder Tolkien was so taken on it and inspired to write Lord of the Rings, that it it just draws you in. How so many people are drawn to Greek and Egyptian mythology rather than Norse is beyond me. I just think there's nothing better. It's just so poetic and beautiful. Is Norse mythology, and of course associating that with the bloodthirsty Vikings, it seems quite odd, but it's just so beautiful.
well, I mean, we still have so many of like the days of the week, you know, Thor's Day, Thursday. I mean, we have so many things that
Yeah,
have come down into our current like life that we don't even realize. I mean, they were also like really big into the solstices, and also apparently they were kind of a uh not like, what is it where it's like not a patriarch, they were not a matriarch, they were like they were kind of the genders were more equal there than anywhere else. Like if you look
yeah.
at what is that word, there's a word for
They,
that.
yes, they were to a certain extent. But I do know what you mean. Yeah, they had certain masculine and feminine roles, but it seemed that basically the feminine side was, you know, females were in charge of the feminine side and males were in charge of the masculine
Right.
side, and it did cross over as well. I mean, like, I'm actually amazed that the mainstream was so shocked to find that there were actually female warriors. It's like, do you not read these people's mythology? Of course, they're going to have female warriors in their class.
Yeah, yeah, that is really really cool. Okay, so what's your take on, let's switch gears here for a minute. Let's talk about younger Dryas. What's your take on that whole thing?
I do believe that the vast majority of the evidence, I would say, points to the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis. My only problem with it is that there seems to be the spike that everyone points to as being evidence of the impact. I look at the other spike that happened about 1,500 years before that and think, well, they're practically identical. What caused that one? Because it just strikes me as being very unlikely that you'd have
What, the
two
one that was
stones
like in
rising.
12,900 or like BC, or which like
Yeah, it was. Yeah, just before the Younger Dryas even started, there was this sudden spike, which is every bit as obvious as the one that took us out of the Younger Dryas. And that spike seems to get ignored, which points me towards an area that it wasn't an impact. Although, as I say, I do believe that most of the evidence points to an impact.
See, I I
Um,
get I get a little
I've
bit
been a bit of a
I get a little bit weirded out by the impact thing because it's like we don't have evidence of the crater so much because they're saying that it basically probably would have hit ice.
yeah,
That's the argument, right?
yes, yes,
And but then they do say like it would have hit in America, and then there is the Carolina impact craters,
yeah. There's
and
pop marks all over North America, which again does seem to point towards an impact further north, somewhere around Canada or Greenland.
uh
And of course, they do have the supposed impact site in Greenland, which kind of lines up with all those impact sites. So
I mean it's it's got legs, but I also think we could have had a nuclear war. That's just, I mean, I know that's crazy too, but it's just like for me, I look at a lot of like the tektites and the the glass sands and stuff that are like the little pieces of. Okay, so when they did the atomic bomb in Alamogordo, New Mexico, there was a new kind of rock called tritite or whatever, right? Which is like the result of what the nuclear blast did to like the sand. Well, you find that same kind of thing in like all kinds of deserts, and I don't think it's just like actual tektite, like moldavite, australite, things like this. Like a lot of them are saying that it's the result of after a strike hits, it's like what happens to all the debris. It's like the debris
yeah,
field of an impact. But I don't know, what if we had solar flashes? Could have
well,
probably
yes,
done.
I must admit, I tend to go along with Dr. Robert Schoch's idea about a solar blast, some sort of as a bit of a joke, I refer to it as a solar fart. But basically,
Solar
where the sun kind of like let loose, and that could have caused a lot of the damage that we do see associated with the Younger Dryas.
like a
That's why I
corona
tend to
mass
agree with
ejection hit us.
yeah,
Yeah. Well, the thing that made me most go like whoa is when I was in Moab, there and you're at like Arches National Park, they have a petrified sand dunes, and there's petrified sand dunes all over the world, but petrified sand
yeah,
dunes are like what? Like how did these sand dunes get basically melded together and petrified? That
yeah.
seems to me like the only thing that could have done that was a fusion of extreme heat from something that they would have been blown away with the impact. I don't know. It's like a comet doesn't seem to like an impact doesn't seem to solve that problem. That has to have been from
Yeah.
kind of like a flash, or it could be a micro burst or
Well,
whatever.
I know that a lot of them, I about to say, yeah, a lot of them that follow the impact theory, they now say that they also believe there were further debris which basically exploded in the air, like
Right.
Tunguska style explosion, which, yes, could account for it. But
But even
I
with
just
that, with the
also find a lot
Tunguska
of
stuff,
issues.
it's like, yes, that took out miles of trees and it did a lot of stuff, but it didn't fuse this ground.
No,
And then they're saying, like,
no,
well, it
it
would have been a
didn't.
hundred times more than the Tunguska blast. But I'm like, well, if it was 100 times bigger blast than the Tunguska blast, one, that could be a nuke. Two, that could be like, why wouldn't it have had an impact crater then? Because that
Yeah,
if it's 100 times bigger, then it would have had 100 times more chance of the debris being big enough that it would have actually not been burned up in the atmosphere. And I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud, but so don't. I mean, I don't have any legs
no,
or any proof of anything, but
no, I completely agree with you. As I say, that's why I kind of like started drifting towards Dr. Robert Schoch's idea and away from the impact theory. Because originally I was all for the impact theory, but just like you, I'm just looking at so much of the evidence of what happened, and it doesn't seem to match an impact to me. So I've kind of like gone through where I've got two theories now. One of them is, as I say, a bit along the lines of Dr. Robert Schoch's idea, where the sun went nuts, basically,
Mm.
and caused a lot of damage through massive solar flares, which are far beyond anything that we've actually witnessed in recent years. Another idea I had, which I came across by accident by researching the original idea, was that maybe there was some sort of a stellar fragment which might have drifted through our solar system, and there might have been an exchange of material between this
You
stellar
mean kind
fragment
of
and the
like
sun.
what do you call it? Like a giant satellite or like another moon that came close to us, or what do you mean?
A fragment of a dying or dead star,
Yeah, but how big would that have been?
even very small ones. Well,
Okay.
even very small ones would have had a huge amount of gravity.
Oh, I get,
I
and
think I
also
remember
that could
hearing
have
something
had
like
a lot of gas material or still had some of the like the burningness of it or something.
it almost certainly would have, yeah. And if that had come close enough, there would have been an exchange of material between the sun and that stellar fragment.
Hmm.
And if Earth drifted within the uh, corridor of that exchange of material, that could have caused a lot of the damage we see just prior to the younger Dryas as well.
Hmm.
And the gravitational shift it would have caused as well, that could explain things like the odd rotation of Venus and one of the gas giants, I can't remember which one now, which is basically rolling around on its side. And I was just
The
thinking if
whole
something with a huge amount of gravity drifted through our solar system, uh, maybe it caused those problems.
Planet
It might
Nine.
have changed the rotation of those planets.
Yeah, or the 12th planet or whatever. Yeah. Um, I
Yeah,
think about also I think about poles flipping. The poles could have flipped, and we just are somehow not getting that marker there. And then there's also like there's I've also heard theories of like Dr. Charles Cost like was telling me about the whole shrinking Earth or expanding Earth theory. Like, I mean, we
yeah,
do know that you had like Doggerland went and like they said, like, oh well, that's because the ice caps just melted on top of it, and I'm like, I don't think that would sink a continent, but okay. I don't know. Like, there's a lot of things like that happened during that time. Basically, we went through a ginormous uh geological reshaping. Not even that long ago, like 10,000 years ago.
yeah, absolutely. And I think it altered the way humanity perceived the world around them in a very big way.
Yeah, it really did. I do. I'm like you, where I keep on re-examining what happened or would have happened because I don't think there's quite. There seems to be like these two camps where it's like, um, the traditionalists just have their head in the sand like this, and they're like, "What? No,
Yeah,
we don't. Oh man, I don't know." And then you have like the more Graham Hancock thing, where who I love, but still, he's just like it's like it was this, and this is what happened, and this is how it happened, and that's why it's like this. And I'm like, nah,
yeah.
we don't really understand exactly 100% what happened right there.
No. Well, it kind of like reminds me. Do you remember the
Something
Boxing
happened.
Day tsunami um,
The one in
several years
Indonesia.
ago? Yeah, up till then, the idea of a tsunami being that size was unfathomable to us. And as soon as that happened, we started seeing markers for it all around the world, and they started saying, "Oh, if that mountain in Tenerife collapses, that's going to hit the United States
Right. Yeah. If La
eastern
Palma.
seaboard and the
Yeah.
like." And
Exactly.
yeah, and it's
Well,
like I think that's kind of like the case we're in now. We see this damage that was caused prior to the Younger Dryas, and we can't match it to all because we haven't actually seen anything capable of causing that amount of damage. So we're kind of like just throwing mud, hoping something sticks, and
and I think deserts in general,
getting
like you had
things.
like the Atacama Desert in Chile, and there's parts of Peru that have like where the Nazca lines are. The reason the Nazca lines can exist is because it hasn't rained there in like 2,000 years. Like, or it gets like the amount of rain it gets is
Yeah.
just like insane, like an inch a year. Like some, I don't know what it is exactly, but it's extremely low. It's like, uh, and then you're kind of going like, and then right next to it you have the Amazon jungle, like that's our, forest. I mean, it's just it makes you kind of go like, wait, why? Like, why do clouds not like that area? Like, what's the deal? Like, what's like when you like start looking at like the Sahara and stuff like that, and then I learned about how like, well, I remember when I was a kid I used to say like, well, why don't they just water all the plants with the ocean water? There's plenty of that. They could just pump in ocean water, put it everywhere. And my mom and dad like was like, oh well, like the saline water like would kill the plants. It kills everything. And then so I think about, well, like the reason some of these deserts I think are like this are, I mean, maybe people have tested this and this is also just me thinking aloud and it's probably crap, but I mean, it could all just be like there's too much salt like deposits in the soil, so they aren't that you can't grow plant life there. It's not even a matter of,
Yeah.
and I think that could be from ginormous tsunamis that the ocean came and went like, yo, what up?
Yeah.
Definitely looks like that in the Sahara.
Possible. I got about to point out the Sahara. Yeah, the fact that because Jimmy from Bright Insight is right about that because as soon as he said that the sand in the Sahara is ocean sand, it's not the typical sand you find on land. I thought that can't be right, so I actually read into it, and yeah, apparently it is. And it's like, well, then why have we still got all this ocean sand there if it's apparently been above ground for God knows how many tens of thousands of years now? So
Yeah.
it does seem more likely that there could have been water there far more recently.
Even the deserts in the US that are in the middle of the continent, right? Like they like in Chaco Canyon, there's like a giant shark they found. I mean, they used to be the ocean, but they're like, oh, I don't know however many millions of years ago they said, but yeah, like all that stuff was underneath the ocean at one point. And at so some point we do know that the salination of or the amount of salt deposits gets down to where you can then have Texas what it is today. I don't know.
Yeah,
So that the deserts won't be deserts forever, basically, is what I'm trying to say.
yeah,
But I also think that they could probably go to the way of the desert in the flash of an eye just by being drenched with
yeah.
ocean.
Uh, Possible. I mean, apparently
Maybe.
I don't know if they're still claiming it, but I know years and years ago they were claiming that basically the Sahara is moving and it's now enveloping southern Europe. It's reaching into Spain and Portugal, and it's kind of like turning their southern regions into part of the Sahara now, where once it was green, it's now becoming desert.
Well, I know that they definitely have started to do the in the south of the Sahara. They've tried to do like a ton, like a big campaign to plant like all these kinds of trees to keep it from spreading further south. Um,
Yeah.
I don't know. So what's your Atlantis theories? Like you mentioned Jimmy and the Rickott structure and everything. So or you didn't mention the Rickott structure, but now you can. So
Yeah.
where do you fall on the whole Atlantis thing?
Uh, Personally, my thoughts at the moment is that Atlantis might be a representation, kind of like a distant memory. I don't tend to believe that there was actually a place called Atlantis, if you get what I mean, that
Yeah.
it's just a representation. But I would say that if Atlantis as a city did exist, I would personally say that the recap structure for me does seem one of the most likely locations for it, simply because that would just explain there is a chance that there were more water in the Sahara. We do know it was once a green place as well. So I don't see why the recap structure couldn't have been Atlantis. But yeah, personally, I do tend to believe that it's like a memory of a lost civilization rather than being an actual lost civilization in itself. Because
Hmm.
you also see a lot of similarities between ancient stories of ancient cities such as Atlantis, the Norse Asgard, even Troy and Camelot. They all seem to share quite a lot of similarities. So it's almost like there's this ancient memory in the human psyche, and it just keeps traveling and slowly changing over time.
Right. And it's almost like it could also be like semblances of our verbal history passed down that we're, that
Yeah,
we reappropriate depending on which cultures. And um, for me, the recut structure, I think it's a good likelihood candidate, sure. But the one that like in my heart that I feel the most, that's like, yes, that's it. I think it's Doggerland. Like I feel like because it actually sunk in the time frame that it was supposed to sink. And yeah, I don't really hear a lot of people thinking that it's actually Doggerland, but like as soon as I learned about Doggerland, I was like, oh, that's Atlantis. Like that's what I feel. But I don't know. But I do think that the Rickard structure does have pottery that has been found around it that they say, which makes me go like, okay, well then there was definitely civilization at some point there. I don't know if it was the Atlanteans or not. Whatever the Atlanteans is, for me, that just means like pre-Diluvian it just means like an advanced civilization. It doesn't even have to be like advanced like iPhone advanced, like even if you want to call that advanced, it's not that advanced. Like, I think it'd be way more
yeah,
advanced if you could be more like Avatar and like build bridges out of tree roots or some shit. Like that would be way more advanced than what we currently do. Like we have like ugly cinder block stuff and we think that we're so advanced. But I digress. Sorry about that. For me, when people talk about Atlantis, it's just basically you might as well just say, do you believe that there was that we were not just cavemen before the ice age? Like, do you believe that we were actually capable of organizing and creating cities and having, uh, like a civilization that is a functional civilization like we had today? And maybe, obviously, because of the way that they manipulated stone at one point that we can't re-emulate today, they had a different kind of technology that we don't currently have. So I look at the word Atlantis as like a past advanced civilization. So, but that could also just be like, well, I'm just making up words to go along with, or making up terms to go with this word. That I guess I've read Plato's, tinnitus or whatever. Actually, tinnitus is the ear thing. What is it? Timaeus and.
don't make me laugh.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm in a mood, I guess. I don't know, but like it's like I can hear all the criticisms like like as I'm talking and I'm like shut up okay, yes, I said that wrong, it's okay. But anyway,
People, you can't even mention Atlantis, can you, without being looked at as if you're somewhat crazy? And it's like, why? What's your definition of Atlantis? Because I'm quite sure there's probably a different definition of Atlantis for each person that you ask. A bit like,
yeah,
I mean, God doesn't exist. Well, sure, it depends on your definition of what your God is.
very very true, very true. And that's also, I mean, but I have had to release the you know I'm already crazy. Anybody who's listened to my podcast for like 2 seconds is like, that chick's crazy. And they're either like okay with it and they'll like continue listening, or they've moved on to go watch videos about hair. Like, I don't know, whatever it is, I'm not judging them. I watch videos about hair too, I guess. But I'm just saying that, you at some point you have to let go of staying in the lines and just be like, hey, we're not going to figure out anything in the lines. We're already in the lines. You have to kind of like, I like how you look at what's in the lines and you're kind of going like, does that make sense? Let's dig a little further into that, because I feel like that's how you push the barrier. What's your, so you have some Giza theories. What do you think the pyramids were for?
The pyramids, I believe, were a final construction. I believe the area went through multiple phases of being built upon. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what the very first use was, but my theory is that the first major use of it was actually as a mine, and I believe not for a lot of the materials people would suggest. It's actually for shale. I believe it might have actually been a shale mine.
Okay.
There's
Yeah,
actually
because
a lot of
limestone.
shale buried. Yeah, it's a lot of shale is buried immediately underneath the Giza plateau. And because of the river running through there, that'd make it a perfect area for shale, and including oil shale as well, which could explain where the Egyptians were able to use fire without apparently burning very little wood.
Hmm.
it's also kind of like an all-round building material. You get cement, pottery. We even use it today in such as roof tiles and the like. It's such a multi-use material, and it's all over our buildings all around the world right now.
Like shell or like crude oil from the shell. What are you talking? Which one?
Uh, Shale, the
Oh,
sediment,
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah,
rock.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, the material. It's used in so many things, and people don't even realize. And it could almost be like to an ancient civilization. It could almost be viewed as their version of plastic. It's so multi-use,
Mm.
and personally, I believe that's why you could have had an advanced civilization. Again, air quotes, advanced. Um, an advanced civilization that's left very little behind for us to find because shale, with it being, I think it's something like over a
Very
third
soft.
of the surface, and it could be absolutely everywhere and we wouldn't recognize it because it's already there in the ground as well.
Hmm. I get right,
So
and
they
it
were using
erodes.
shale. And,
Like after time, it kind of erodes into
yes,
nothing. Yeah.
quite quickly. Yeah, quite quickly. So it wouldn't take long before civilization that used shale in virtually everything for most of the evidence of that civilization to vanish. It had happened within a couple of thousand years.
Just like the wood people.
Yeah,
Yeah. Pretty much
yeah,
like hard stones are the only thing that are going to stand the test of time. It looks like.
exactly.
Yeah, it's so interesting because like I've talked to so many different people now that have different theories about what the Giza uh, plateau like is a function or not. I don't know. I really don't know. I like to hear everybody else who's like going like,
Yeah.
oh, what is it, this
Well,
or this? I mean,
I
I
don't
get
know. I just saw all the shale there, learned about all its uses, and thought, oh, that could explain a few things. So that's why I went with the
well, it
theory that,
definitely has an underground tunnel system that
yeah,
we aren't allowed to have access to, so we don't know exactly how extensive it is, but we hear rumors that it is very extensive and all over the plateau.
yeah.
So, I mean, that could just be mine shafts as well, like you're saying, you know.
Well, the Steeler that's at the pause of the Sphinx.
Uh-huh.
It had the what a lot of people think is a map of the underground caverns on it, and that map is actually very similar to modern day mining excavation tool. Corridor and I think it's called Corridor and Hall or something like that. But basically, it's made up of where you've got corridors and intersecting halls, and they're dotted all around it in a grid formation, at a post to keep the tunnels up, basically. And it looks almost identical to the impression that's in the Sphinx Steeler,
Hmm.
which is
I
another reason why I thought some sort of mine.
I need to look at that because I have pictures of that stela. I need to look at that map. That's kind of interesting. I hadn't thought about that. I mean, I also kind of think that the underground. Okay, there's underground kind of cave systems and stuff like all over the world, right? Like you have like the Kuru and the Turkey, and then you even have, I mean, you even have kind of more like cliff dwellings and the Native American stuff. Like you have people who've built inside the rock and stuff. For like, I always sort of thought it was, or at least in my fantastical imagination, I was just imagining they were getting like or protecting themselves from solar flashes or from
Yeah.
whatever kind of stuff that was going on back then anyway. Um, I don't know though, but that's interesting. It could just be old mines that, you know.
Well, it still suit the theory you just mentioned as well. Anyway, if those mines were made far enough back, because of course it takes time to tunnel out so
Mm-hmm.
much
A lot of
material
time.
to create these huge caverns and um, I was going to say mines then, but that's kind of like uh, the cave systems that we see, the man-made cave systems. It takes time to do that. You're not going to do that if you're already being hit by a disaster.
Right.
So
You have to do
My
it
thought was
beforehand.
that perhaps there were already mines and they used those mines when disaster struck.
That's a very good point. And if like the same kind of disaster struck now, I guess that's where we would have to go is current mines
Yeah,
or yeah, there are old existing ones that we knew
yeah.
if you survived it. Okay, so you said you've had some cuz I like weird. Like I'm into exploring the fringe, right? So, okay, what's your supernatural experiences that you've had? I like this kind of stuff.
You'll really like this because basically, straight off, I'll say that I've got a theory when it comes to things like UFOs and ghosts and all that lot, and it's that it could all be linked and it could be due to kind of like breaks in what we view as our reality. And the reason for that, well, one of the reasons is because of what happened to me. I've actually had two paranormal experiences which are very different. Uh, there was a sudden momentary connection between me and my friend where we actually almost talk to each other telepathically,
Like a mind
despite the
meld?
fact we're opposite ends of the building. Yeah, we're opposite ends of the building. We both had thoughts, and yet somehow we each heard that thought. Because my mate David, he was at the other end, and I've been waiting for him for a while, and I was thinking, David, where are you? And then I heard him shout, Paul, come look at this. So I ran down the corridor, and we almost ran straight into each other. And he thought he heard me say, David, where are you?
Wow,
And then
yeah.
I said, oh, right. Well, I didn't say that, but I came running because you said, Paul, come look at this. And he went, I never said anything. And then he took me to go see what it was that he'd actually seen. And we just saw these. At the time, we thought it looked like jet fighters maneuvering around each other. But bearing in mind, we're in a big building in the middle of Leeds, which is about the fourth biggest city in the UK. So you're not going to have jet fighters doing maneuvers above a city like that. And yeah, we just saw these vehicles with what looks like two lights dancing around above. So it's like we had a telepathic experience and a UFO experience in one go.
That's interesting because I feel like that was like you were both called to go look at that. Like
Yeah.
literally.
Well, that's it. I could understand him thinking that he heard me say, David, where are you? Because, of course,
You were
he'd been
running
away
towards
for some time. So I
right.
might have thought that I'd be waiting for him. I might be getting a bit impatient. But there's no way I could have known he'd spotted something weird and was desperate for me to come see it. So that's why we judged it that it must have been some kind of like telepathy between us. But it never happened before. It never happened again. But there again, neither of us have ever seen possible UFOs before then or since then.
That's really really cool. When did this happen?
Yeah. Oh, it was a while ago now, about 2002.
Okay, wow. Yeah.
And I've not seen or heard anything again since.
See, um I have telepathic experiences a lot. Like when I first the first I did this Earthship thing and I met this one of my good friends there, and the first time I met him, like I was like, oh hey, I'm Nikki. He was like, yeah, I'm. And like we were shaking hands or whatever, and then I sat down next to him and we're kind of like listening to the orientation, and I say like I'm like, what do you do? Or I don't know, what do you do? We were talking about something. He was like, how'd you get off of your job for like a month? I was like, I'm a flight attendant. I just moved some stuff around. And I was like, well, how'd you get off yours for a month or something? And he was just like, oh, I'm a computer programmer or something. And then I thought I heard him say out loud, but I didn't. I heard it in my head. I heard him say something about like I can't remember the exact phrasing now, but it was like, oh, the work, like the grind of, or the daily grind of something or whatever. And I just repeated what he said. And he was like, I didn't say that out loud. How did you hear it? And I was like, well, yeah, you did. And he was like, and then I was like, why would I repeat what he just said out loud? I don't know. I have those kinds of things a lot. Like I hear, like today, I was in the car with my mom earlier, and uh, I started singing this song out loud, and she was just like, I was singing that in my head right before you sang that, and I was like, hmm. that kind of stuff always happens. So I think that there's an ether. There's or something. I think there's our thought waves are on a frequency, and if you're just sort of like chilling like a villain, you can kind of pick it up. But that one, I don't even think is like that. That's like I feel like that was like the UFOs were individually calling each of you guys to come out and look
Yeah.
at them.
It was
And
certainly a very strange experience.
but
At
there's a
the
lot
time,
of
we thought
stuff
it was
with
jet fighters.
like I don't know about necessarily jet fighters, but a lot of people, for example, I had I was this was like November of 2019. I was in Dallas, and I was going to a gym, and I was in the parking lot, and I got out and I saw like there was like 12 or 13 of these like silver orbs, like these little silver orbs, like and pretty high in the sky, and I was like, whoa. And I was like trying to look around at other people in the parking lot, like, look at this, look, and like nobody cared. And I was like, I get my phone out, and I'm trying. The pictures are horrible. I don't even know if I still have them, but I probably have them. I could try to put them up here. But I'm like trying to like photograph them. I didn't know if they were balloons or something that was just going around. But then out of literally thin air, black helicopters, like three black helicopters appeared and started like circling around these, and they didn't even make noise, but they were just up there. And I'm like going like, holy cow. And then so I started looking into, are black helicopters themselves UFOs? And I think that there's a whole lot of like what I saw there. I feel like there's a whole lot of stories I've heard of people talking about how it's almost like it's a camouflage for a UFO. They become like a black helicopter, an
Yeah,
unmarked black helicopter. And I was kind of like, okay, well, if that's the case, I think I might have saw some of those. And then they all just kind of, like disappeared as soon as they appeared, or not. I mean, like just as they had appeared, they're just like not there all of a sudden. Um,
yeah,
but I tried to record it, and it didn't really come out as anything worth looking at that you could tell something from. And then also nobody around cared. So I don't know. I do think it's some kind of thing where you were saying that it's like they could be interconnected and with our reality. So what do you mean by that?
um, well, like obviously you've got people who theorize about a multi-dimensional universe and the like, and we also all know that uh, our brains senses take in a lot, and our brains basically sort through the muddle and give us a bit of that information, so we're not overloaded. I just wonder if a lot of the experience, not just UFOs and ghosts either, like might include cryptids, and it might explain things like the missing 411 cases, that sort of thing. And that maybe just for a moment, either something is breaking through what we'd call our reality from another dimension into our dimension, or the dimensions are actually a lot closer, and just for a moment, our brains are letting us see that. It's just a lot of the different experiences, they seem to generate the same sort of feelings, and they impact people in the same way. Like how you were just talking about how none of your pictures came out, and you get that as well with cryptid people trying to take pictures of cryptids or trying to take pictures of ghosts. They always seems to be a feeling of the air, almost like electricity in the air. With UFOs and missing 411, they always seem to be severe weather changes immediately after the event. Things like that. It just makes it all seem like it's somewhat connected.
Yeah, I definitely
And
think
but
that
I can't believe all these things are there.
I even think that that applies to with the cryptids, like with your Bigfoot and all that stuff too. But I think it applies to the fairy realm as well. Your little elf in your fairy realm too.
Yeah.
Like I've had some bizarre experiences there. But what do you think about Bigfoot? What do you think's going on with that?
In truth, I used to be just completely in it. I used to just completely believe it, but over time, it's like I would have thought there'd be a lot more evidence. I'm kind of like leaning again towards it maybe being like probably best explanation I could say is look at Skinwalker Ranch, because you seem to get pretty much all these experiences in that one place. So
Like a
it makes me
portal.
wonder if, yeah, and maybe that's why we're seeing, such as Bigfoot, that for a moment they're coming into our realm before disappearing again, and that's why we can
Yeah.
never catch
Well,
them
the
or even get
people
any
who think that it's
evidence.
a physical thing that like are not a physical thing. The people who think that it's basically like another hominin that currently exists on our planet that we just can't seem to catch. I don't think that's the case. Like
No, I'm sure we would have by now. There's been so many people who's tried, and
actively
someone
trying and
would have
looking.
got.
And
Yeah,
I know people who personally like I personally know people who've had run-ins. So like I'm not discounting that they don't exist, but what I'm saying is that like I'm kind of agreeing with you in terms of like I think that they could be interdimensional in terms of like they're or and like there's almost like a thinning
yeah,
of the veil where you can see them for just a minute and then they're gone. Or like I don't think that they're
yeah. It's
yeah.
almost like looking through glass that somewhere else.
Yeah. That's
And it would explain a lot of the say it's Skinwalker Ranch that led me down that path towards looking at these events in such a way as well. Just the fact that you had all these different experiences, UFOs, cryptids like the giant wolf and the like, and
right,
it
the
was all
dog
happening
man.
in one place, and it just made me think, yeah, it seemed very odd that all these things being in that one area, which made me think that maybe there's something about that area. I mean, like I can't remember where I heard it now, but apparently there was an ancient meteorite impact in that location,
Mm,
and it changed the mingle deposits in the area, and it just made me wonder: could those minerals be responsible for kind of like disabling the barrier between dimensions or realities, however you want to look at it?
well, it's interesting you mentioned that because there's also the zone of silence in Mexico, which is like nobody's cell phones work there or whatever, and it's actually like taken some missiles and like basically pulled them into that area when they've been shot from like
Yeah,
even they've been shot from New Mexico and they've ended up in mid Mexico in the zone of silence. They completely go off round range and they say that there's a lot of magnetic anomalies there and there's also a lot of
yeah,
that's like Mexico's Skinwalker Ranch, if you will. Like that's like where a lot of really bizarre UFO experiences and things like that happen for there. So like it
yeah,
makes you kind of wonder about like say these meteorite sites or these anomalies if there are kind of their own there is their own kind of um we think of AI or not AI, but we think of extraterrestrial as just like gray aliens, but it also could be interdimensional and it could be it also could be AI in a way. Like there's
yeah.
a lot of uh, there's a lot of stuff that could go into that as well. But yeah, so like that is really interesting. I don't know, the ghost thing is weird though. Like cuz ghosts can be somebody. It could be like a personal like you have a run in with, you
Yeah.
know, a dead relative or whatever.
Um, yeah, again, that made me think of maybe a dimensional thing though, because I remember hearing a story. I think it might have been from a YouTube channel called Bedtime Stories. Always listening to them, and they had a story where apparently, if it was them, um, there was a story of a man being seen walk crossing a street in a town centre in the US, but I can't for life me remember where. Crossing a street, and before he reached the other side, it just kind of like vanished. It not instantly, it kind of like just dematerialized as he crossed the road until he'd completely gone. And
Mm-hmm.
this were in front of several witnesses. The thing is, all the witnesses knew the guy, so it couldn't have been a ghost because he was actually still alive and living in that town, but he wasn't there.
See, that's
And
yeah, I heard of something
I
similar
was
to
going to
that.
say that just made me think, could that be like a dimensional thing? Maybe they saw the same sort of guy maybe is connected to the guy in our realm, so to speak, I suppose. and he was crossing that street in his realm, I suppose you'd say, and it's just a case of that for some reason the people in this realm could see him doing it.
I heard a
It was just
story.
a very odd story.
Yeah, that's interesting. It reminds me of this story I heard about how there was this. I don't remember where I heard this one. I mean, it was some kind of podcast, but this guy was telling this ghost story about how he was in like his like an old family house, and he basically saw like this ghost experience where this uncle that had died and his aunt were having a fight, and like one of them was packing a suitcase, and like he like opened the door to this bedroom and they were yelling at each other, and um she was packing her suitcase, and she was younger than he had ever seen her, and she was still alive. His uncle was already dead, but his aunt was still alive. He's like, but he saw like a younger version of her in
Yeah,
this room. Like, and so he said it was like a weird ghost experience. He's like, it's almost like he saw it's almost as if like this moment was like imprinted on that space, on that location. And then
yeah,
so it's like you were seeing a time loop of that, or a glitch of, yeah, I don't know how to explain it, but kind of it sounds kind of similar, where she wasn't even like, wasn't her
so,
spirit, like she wasn't dead, she was. But that's why I think it's interesting
yeah,
when they talk about experiences like you see Henry VIII walk through a certain place of Kensington Palace, like certain people, or you see these recurring ghost experiences, like, oh, you'll see the white lady walk down the stairs here. Oh, you see the white lady. You know, a lot of people have seen
yeah.
her. That could just be almost like a time imprint, you know, rather than the ghost of the person.
Yeah, no, excuse me. Um, don't work with children. um, yeah, we're going to say that. Yeah, obviously it can't be ghosts if the people aren't dead. So, like you say, one interpretation will be is that some sort of time loop that could. Is it like something a hyper emotional state could make it that you imprint that moment in that space or something like that? And it's not really my field. I haven't looked at ghosts for a long time, but it does seem to answer questions rather than just saying, "Oh, it's just a ghost or it's hallucinate." How do you hallucinate a family member being younger than what she is? I don't see how you're going to do that.
Mm, that's good. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it is true.
Surely
Okay,
it
so
was a
let's
hallucination.
shift gears again and go back to, like, walk us through your, give us a little bit of your Jericho tower, like tell us what traditional thing thinks about this whole tower thing, tower builders, and then to where you've gone with it, or where your new theories kind of lie with this part.
Okay. Sorry about the cough, by the way.
Oh, you're fine.
Yeah,
I'm
no,
sorry that
I
you're
heard about
coughing.
it.
I hope you feel better soon.
Um, I heard about these towers a while back, and the mainstream instantly said that it was some sort of ceremonial place because at first it was considered maybe they were a defensive tower, but the the gap in them is about that wide to climb up, so you're not going to be carrying any weapons or anything, and you'll be crawling up the space to get to the top of the tower, and it won't be enough room to fit everybody from the village
Right,
up
it's
there
a
anyway.
single
So
person
yeah,
staircase.
so defensive wise, it just wouldn't work. So they've gone with ceremonial, but it just seems strange that they're talking about the mainstream view is that you still had everybody being hunter gatherers at the time, and somehow these multiple groups of hunter gatherers, because it was a lot of work, it had taken more than one group. Multiple groups all came together, built this tower, and then left and just occasionally turned back up for some religious festival or something. And it just seemed that it just seems a very odd way of looking at our ancestors that hunter gatherers would be so spiritual that they'd build some sort of brick tower just so they could occasionally go to it and do some sort of worshipping at it. I personally would have thought our the hunter gatherers would be more, how to put this? Well, they'd have been used to nature, so I don't see them developing some sort of belief in a god, even if they had some sort of belief in, you know, nature's power, maybe, and that could explain the Venus uh, sculptures that you see around.
Right.
But it's one hell of a jump to go from a bunch of hunter gatherers going in all different directions to suddenly gathering on a place and building a 3-story tower just so you could worship there when you were constantly on the move for the rest of the time. That just seems strange for me. So my point of view is that maybe it was at a time, we know for a fact it was built during the time of the younger Dryas. It was built at a time when a lot of the megafauna was dying out, which at the time the people would have relied on for meat as a resource. So my idea was that perhaps they decided it was no longer worth expending the energy chasing around the open ground just in the hope of running into something. So they picked a spot near a water source, which was also near where all the animals migrated through, and they built a tower there so they could keep a lookout for their prey and then go out and get their prey. And that for me is, I believe that's what the watchtower at Jericho was about. And because people needed to be at the tower to use it, they then kind of like just settled there. So rather than it being a religious point where multiple groups built it and then settled all around it with all the problems that would have invited as well, multiple groups who didn't really know each other settling all in one place. Instead, they all came together for a common cause, which was food.
Right. So
And
you think it's like the original, like one of the where the hunters like sit in their little towers, like waiting for the deer to come by.
absolutely, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, very much so. And it'd be just such a more energy efficient way of hunting that rather than constantly being on the move, because this area was very lush as well. Of course, as I say, it had its own spring. So it was a very lush area. You wouldn't have wanted to move away from that at a time when water resources and food resources were on the decline. So you're going to want to stay in that area. So you build a tower so that you can keep a lookout for migrating animals, and then you can go out and hunt them, keeping your meat supplies up while staying around where your water and your your berries and other green food stuffs were.
The Tower of Jericho, is that, I mean, like some of the images like in your like it looks so modern even. It doesn't even look like it's that old. Like
It doesn't know, but it has been dated to being at least 11,000 years old.
how has it stood the test of time that well? It looks like pretty well preserved in my opinion.
It does, yes. Like scenes of it was built inside a tell, the very same kind of a hill that protected Gobekli Tepe.
Right. Right.
And
So
so
uh,
what it seems that they did is they built the tower, they built the original Jericho around it, and then they just kept on building on top of that original town. Again, just like Troy as well, how Troy has many different levels.
mhm.
So does Jericho, and by the seems of it, they just kept building on top, and basically it got buried, and that's how it was preserved. But it was in use for thousands of years as well.
Yeah,
So
that one yeah.
they
That
must have
is yeah.
been rebuilding it when the structure became unsound because it is only made of small stone blocks. So, but at the same time, it again, like I say, it just doesn't seem to fit what I'd say is the idea of hunter gatherers and what they needed to be on the move looking for food. They're not going to stop for up to, I believe, I think about 8 months, and multiple groups doing this as well, not just the one group. Multiple groups of hunter gatherers just stop hunting for food just so they can build this tower. That just doesn't seem right to me.
Yeah, it doesn't. And I think what we I think we have this this presumption that hunter gatherer equals not that smart. All they're doing is trying to survive. And
Yeah,
that's they may have to have their Maslow hierarchy of needs met first, obviously, before they can, do whatever. But it doesn't mean that they weren't smart. It just means that maybe their conditions were crazy. But that is an odd. It is an oddly well built structure to take time to do. It's very, um,
Yeah.
you know, you could just put some, like, you could just do like a modern day hunting thing where it's, like you just use some logs and you get up there. I mean, like this one had a lot of thought and effort that went into it.
Yeah, I'd agree, and I do wonder if that originally before that perhaps was actually a wooden structure, or even maybe a structure made of mammoth bones or something like that, because they were building with
Right.
those sort of materials as well. But over time, they decided they wanted something permanent, and so they built a bone structure, rock structure, and perhaps they just kept building it up because the interior stairwell is extremely simplistic, considering how difficult the tower itself would have been to construct. The
So
supposed
it's
access
basically
is
solid
very
brick,
simple.
right? Nothing's hollow in it. It's just like solid brick that goes up, like,
With the
with the
exception of
exception
the
of the.
access, which is through it, which again for religious structure, I didn't see the point in that. Why didn't they just build an exterior structure, which they were
They
doing
use
thousands of
the
years later?
words ceremonial and temple and ritual like water. They use like that
Yeah,
that they use those words like everything was for ceremonial purposes and everything was a temple and everything was I mean they the way they use those you would think that that's like the it's the only thing people ever were obsessed with.
yes,
Eating,
it seems
sleeping
that
and going
for
to
them,
ceremony.
yeah,
Like so like
yeah,
I
for
that's
me
why
too.
anytime I hear those words I'm kind of like uh-huh. Yeah, like whatever. Like sure.
I do the exact same thing. The moment I hear those words, yeah, my eyes start rolling, and it's like, oh, here we go again.
Right.
That's what it was with the towers. I heard how it was ceremonial, and yeah, instantly I just like, oh yes, of course it was. Did you even look at it? And yeah, it's just again with it being ceremonial, the fact that it was the very first structure to be built there as well that they can find evidence for. There were no houses, no wall, nothing. They built this tower, and then over time after the tower, they built the
And the town
houses, and we
built, yeah.
think surely that's a backwards way of doing it.
Yeah.
If
I mean, well,
if it
we don't have evidence of that. Like obviously they didn't build their houses the same out of the same maybe they built their houses out of wood. And
Yeah,
yeah, I don't know, but it's yeah, that's it does make you kind of go like the way we frame history to me is almost kind of like sometimes it's insulting to our ancestors.
yes. And I think also it could be part of this like there seems to be a modern phenomenon where it's perfectly okay now to associate. I mean, I say this as somebody who doesn't have any religious beliefs, but it seems we're in a time now where it's perfectly acceptable to associate religious belief with kind of like ancestral thinking, like a basic level of thinking.
Oh,
Uh, to an extent where basically you're considered almost like a prehistoric thinker just for being religious. So yeah, they seem to decide like what you mentioned earlier, because these people were supposedly more simple than us, they must have been religious. And that does seem to be something they jump on every single time.
yeah, which
When
is interesting because it's like before the Judeo-Christian kind of religion, the monotheistic religions, it's like there was it seemed to me if you look at like Old Norse or a lot of like the pagan kind of type stuff, it was very much more about equinoxes and seasons.
yeah,
Things seem to be more about like, okay, if we're doing a ceremony, it's not necessarily to like, yes, master, yes. It's more like, okay, this astrological marker is marking that this season's happening. Okay, let's get together and do a big feast because we're about to go into this harvest kind thing or
yeah,
this planting season or whatever. It seemed to be like it was more indications of what you could do like yeah with that basically. I guess I said all I could say about that little point. um But yeah, I don't know. The actual personification of things
Yeah,
came a little bit later
it
from
does seem
that
that
we know.
yeah, it does seem like a lot of the ancient religious stories, as they've been put, they do seem to be more an explanation of how the natural world works. They
Right.
seem to explain what to expect at certain times of year, and it does seem that it's more a teaching mechanism. It's not a religion as we view it. It's more just a way of before a time of being able to write things down. You'd explain things via a story, so it's more easily remembered. I mean, we still do this sort of practice even now. So why, as ancestors who didn't have computers and notepads and pens, wouldn't have done it is beyond me. It seems obvious that that's how they'd recall information and pass it on.
Yeah, I agree. I do agree with that. Um, it's just so weird that we live like we really have such amnesia because it's like our records are just so riddled with holes. Everything really is. So it makes it when you find something that's a little bit anomalous, that's kind of going like, wait, what? Wait, where? The hell is this? Where is this? What is this? What's your story on how you came up with what this is? It gets it's a never ending rabbit hole.
Yeah, I remember first hearing. Excuse me.
I'm sorry.
I remember first hearing about how they decided that you know the, certain kings built the pyramids in Egypt, and it was simply a case of they'd already decided who'd built the Great Pyramid, and if that king could build the Great Pyramid, then that king could have built that one, and that king could have built that one, and it's like that's such an odd way of deciding who did what. What? Why aren't you actually investigating the pyramids themselves?
I mean, and what they do come up with, they'll be like, "Oh, Cheops built the, whatever." I mean, they'll be like, and there's 15 different inscriptions on everything, and when you see those inscriptions, it's like, okay, so you found some chicken scratch on the bottom of like some.
Yeah,
I mean, you're kind of going like, that's not a real like. Look at how they inscribe everything else, like in perfect, amazing hieroglyphic stones. But then the things we find underneath whatever that have somebody's like a graffiti on it, that's my indication that that's what they used to indicate that they built this. It
yeah.
that's that's not no, just no.
No, I don't know if you've heard of him, but that'd be like claiming that Banksy built every single building that he's ever drawn on.
Yes, exactly. That's what it is. That's exactly what it is. And I don't know. I mean, like I said, that kind of goes throughout history with a lot of stuff. There's so much reappropriation, and
Yeah,
then and then we just kind of take whoever reappropriated it and go like, oh yeah, they're the ones who did
yeah,
this
very
amazing
much
feat.
so. I mean, it's a bit like that old joke that in a few thousand years, people think it was the god McDonald's that they built the pyramids for
Yeah,
because of all the
because
McDonald's
of all the
restaurants
golden
and the food
arches.
around it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, that's super funny. Yeah, I mean, this I had a guy on here who's really cool, called Jared Murphy, and his book was called it's not aliens, it's worse, it's us. And he was talking about how he showed an example in his book that I really liked where he went to the Chernobyl or he didn't, but he took a picture of in his book of the Chernobyl like nuclear reactor, and
yeah,
now that it's been exploded and left alone and left into nature or whatever, it looks like, I'll see if I can put an image up here of it. It looks like if you walked across this 1,000 years from now, you'd be like, oh, the energy is so weird in here. It feels weird in here. This is so majestic. What is this? This was for ceremony. This was a temple. This was I mean, like, if you had no context of what it was for, we would all be going like, oh,
yeah,
and this was the number one site that they used to do whatever. And like, I mean, you can, we don't, the point with all that is that we are kind of making stories up on top of made up stories on top of made up stories on top of made up stories.
That's it, very much. It's just funny that you said that about Chernobyl because that's actually what I compared the Great Pyramid to. I was said that I believe the it was a mine in that area originally. Well, I looked at Egyptian mythology. It'll take too long to discuss here, but I went into Egyptian mythology and I came across where it was talking about the River Nile being turned red.
Yeah.
And if you have a mining disaster, if water manages to seep into a mine and then come back out, it comes out blood red. And my idea was that perhaps there was some sort of accident at the mine at Giza, and they entombed it. They put a simple stone plug on it, basically, and then you know, hundreds, maybe even thousands of years later, someone else comes across, see those plugs, and think that it's some sort of ceremonial place, so they build on top of it. And then when the people of Upper Egypt then invade, that's right, Upper Egypt. When they invade, they've been building pyramids down their neck of the woods for a while. They see this grand structure and they complete it by building the pyramid over top of that. And it's rather simplistic, but that's basically my theory behind what the pyramids are.
Well, that's an amazing example because it's like when I lived in south of Albuquerque where Intel was when I was a kid, and they used to wash all the computer chips off with a ton of water, and then they would put it back into the Rio Grande River, and there would be certain times the year or whatever you would see like these giant things of foam on top of the water from like the Intel plant, but it would go down the bottom south, the bottom half of New Mexico, and then they did some sort of environmental thing. I'm not sure how they fixed it or didn't fix it or whatever, but I remember at the time like like thinking, whoa, this is crazy. But yeah, it's an example of how industry could affect something, like, and then the stories of it turning blood red or whatever is could literally just be a chemical reaction from something that they were mining or doing. um
Yeah, because
that's
in ancient Egypt, obviously, if you had chemicals from a mine bleeding into the River Nile, that would have been a huge ecological disaster for everybody. They all
yep,
relied
because
on
that
the
was
River
what they
Nile just
relied on for
disappearing
their.
to this day.
Yeah,
So
that's
poisoning the
crazy.
River Nile would be a disaster.
Never even
Yeah,
thought about that.
it'd be the equivalent of their Chernobyl, which is how I put it in my old video, which I think I've now deleted. But that's what I compared it to. I said it was kind of like the ancient world Chernobyl, that would have poisoned the entire river and it would have made life hellish for years until they plugged up the mine, so it didn't happen anymore.
Hmm. I like that. Okay, so wait, this ancient like you had a bunch of videos that you've deleted. Are you gonna put those back up, or what's your deal with that?
I'm going to be reworking them under cause Endeavour's Way, because me channel used to be called. That was never set up to be a history channel. That was set up to record mine and my family's journey when we moved into a motorhome before all the present day stuff started.
Oh,
So
wow.
it was
Okay.
never actually meant to be a history channel. And so
So you're
just with
change.
my
So you
thoughts
have a
on
different direction. So this one is just more only ancient history stuff.
yeah, now we're living in a house. There's no need for anything to do with our life on the road. So yeah,
Right.
I just thought Distant Origins works better, and so all the videos that I did under Endeavour's Way, which they have a lot of issues with as well. I've made quite a few mistakes because I just started. I want to redo them and put them back up under Distant Origins.
Okay. Okay. Cool. Well,
So they will be coming back up, and hopefully be an improvement on what I put up originally as well. Anyway.
I how do you get the amazing like at David Attenborough reading person? Like, is that just a computer read?
It is, yeah. It's through an app which I've got on my tablet, so I can't look at it at the moment because that's what I'm using.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, I'll send it to you. But yeah,
Yeah,
it's
send it
just
to
an
me.
app
That's
which
interesting.
uses Google Voices. Yeah,
Yeah, because at first I was like,
It's just easier
wow,
than
I'm gonna
using
be
numbers.
interviewing David Attenborough. Like, wait, and then I heard your voice at the end of the video. I was like, oh, I think that must be a computer because it's almost like too perfect or something. Like,
Yeah,
yeah. But yeah, it's got a
yeah, it's very
very
handy as well. It's got something like 14 British English voices. It's got about the same number of American English voices. So it's quite handy because I was thinking of using a regional dialect, but the only other dialect it's got for English other than English speaking nations is India. So I
oh
thought,
right,
well, I can't really use an India accent if I'm talking about the Middle East. So I
right,
decided
right.
against that.
I like yeah, I really
So
like it. It
just using
works.
that British one.
All right, so is there anything that we didn't touch on that you want to kind of touch on?
um, well, there's one thing, another form of video which I'll be going back into, probably with a different point of view as well. Actually, the idea, I mentioned that there's a lot of um, similarities between stories of Asgard, Atlantis, Troy, and I used to
Yeah.
believe that came basically that Asgard was Atlantis, and that you had Atlantis, and then as when Atlantis disappeared, the survivors went in different directions, and that's how you ended up with stories of different places that sounded similar. I don't believe that now, obviously, but I do want to
I
do a
kind of like
video
that
where I
idea
go
though.
back to
Like,
that
tell me
time.
more about that idea and why don't you like it anymore?
It's mostly not a case of the idea itself I dislike. It's because of what I think Atlantis was that's changed. I guess that's why I'd be looking at it differently. But like, for instance, one of the first things that brought me to it again was Norse mythology. Obviously, the Rainbow Bridge. Um,
Mhm.
I can't remember the name of it at the moment, but originally it wasn't known as a rainbow bridge. It was just called the Shimmering Path. And that just made me think, shimmering, that sounds a lot like a river. And of course, the only way out of Atlantis was the river, which started me on the road towards thinking that Asgard and Atlantis might be the same place. They both had big plains. They were both connected to the sea. They were both surrounded by mountains. They
And
both
it
had
and it and they also had the circular thing. Um, Something about Asgard is like in some sort of concentric circle thing. I remember hearing, or at least maybe
yeah,
that's how Thor. That's how Marvel, Disney, or whatever depicts it in the
well,
Thor TV show.
yeah. There's a kind of like a later belief that almost you had all the to use Marvel, they had all the realms and they were all connected by the Rainbow Bridge and they were all set in a tree. But if you look at the original writings, they simply depict that Asgard was at the center, and then surrounded that was Midgard, which was the our realm, and surrounding that was the realm of the giants.
Right,
And
Frost
that does
Giants.
kind of like sound like Atlantis again, as if you had the priest and the kingship in the middle, surrounded by the normal folk, and then outside the gates of Atlantis, you had everybody else who you could say maybe became the giants in later teachings of the story.
Hmm. It makes me it makes me kind of think about I always kind of take note about whatever the mainstream like Disney or whatever they try to sort of like I feel like a lot of these movies and sci-fi things and stuff like that I love them, but I feel like they always try to kind of like put a little nugget of truth here and there and stuff. So like I always wondered like why did they bring back in Marvel of superheroes, like why is everybody else like super like Spider-Man kind of or whatever, like Iron Man or some kind of or like Hawkeye or something like stuff like but then they have a Greek god or a Norse god actually as one of the
Yeah,
superheroes. Everybody else is like super made up and then you have one that's like not. And I wonder like what's the
yeah.
programming that's going on that they're trying to do to us with all these things. Like is there they like are they sprinkling in little nuggets for us, or what's going on with that? I don't know. I always it makes me always makes me think. I'm like, why are they putting this in the collective consciousness of society at this time right now?
I never thought of it that way, to be honest.
Could just be for money, but I mean, I don't
Lack
know.
of imagination.
Could be imagination, could whatever, but maybe it could be something else. Like you just have to wonder like why right now is this being focused on. But anyway, I really loved the whole. That was my favorite part of all the whole Marvel stuff was the Thor stuff.
I
Also because
actually
he's
do have
like
a
super
theory
hot.
around Thor as well. I don't know if you'd like to hear it.
Okay, what?
Um, that you could follow a lineage that might. There I go again. Originally, that the idea of Thor might have come from basically a craftsman, a metalsmith in ancient times, because of course the hammer striking something and sparks and electricity flying off it, very much like it. But later on, as Christianity got involved in Norse mythology, eventually he morphed. Well, not just him, but basically Thor and Odin eventually morphed into Arthur and Merlin.
And who would Freya be? Like the Gwendolyn maybe?
Perhaps she was in some story. It's kind of mixed with her. In some stories, she's supposed to be quite promiscuous. So I can't say that word, but
Promiscuous, yeah.
yeah,
So
she got
maybe she
around.
was Gwendolyn then. But yeah, and Freya is supposed to be where Friday comes from, right? Freya's
Yeah,
Friday, yeah. I don't
and
know.
there was also another god called Frigg, but there's a lot of belief that Frigg and Freya might have actually been the same person that got split over time.
And Loki is interesting. Have you seen the Loki Marvel comics comic series or TV
I
series?
haven't. No, I kind
Oh,
of like got put off by the advertisements for it.
well, if you talk about predictive programming or whatever, you got to watch it with that in mind. But it's all about the timekeepers of our timeline. So like he's a defect and he gets out of like he gets taken out of one of the Marvel movies and he gets put into this bureau of the master timeline and how people are trying to keep things as they should be on this one timeline. So it's all about time travel. It's really interesting actually. It's I don't think it ends like well there's only the first season yet so far, but I mean at the end you're kind of like meh, wah, cliffhanger stuff, but it's an interesting concept where you're kind of going like okay, this is interesting. Like they're starting to talk about time travel with people a lot now lately, so that's also why is that
Yeah,
coming up in
I
our
have
collective
noticed.
consciousness right now. That's kind of interesting.
Well, I suppose you could go down that route because, of course, everyone said that with the X Files, didn't they? Especially on the UFO angle. And there we are, what, 20 years later, and all of a sudden it's in
Yeah.
mainstream news that aliens do exist.
Yep, it's true. And it's like now if you watched X Files, you would be like, it's like, oh, that's so vanilla. That's like so
Yeah.
passe. Like whatever. There's stuff like that that happens in real life that's even crazier. But yeah, no, I mean it is almost like it's like slow drippage of what can society handle? What can we kind of slowly
Yeah.
start to feed? I don't know.
Yeah. Could be. You never
Could be.
know.
I don't know.
Let's face it, as we know with everything that's going on now, they never tell us everything.
They never tell us anything. It feels like you're it's like watch this, look, dance monkey, watch this while we do this. Yeah.
Yeah, very much so. As I say, when there's a big story in the media, you want to see what they've buried in the back pages.
Yep, exactly. All right, Mr. Paul, it was super awesome talking to you. So okay, tell us a little bit about how people can find you. Like you're active on Twitter and you're at Distant Origins. And I'm gonna put that up here, and then your YouTube is the same. At like anywhere else they can find you.
Not at the moment. I am going to be spread now, but at the moment, of course, it's Christmas, so I'm a bit busy.
Yeah, yeah,
So
that's cool.
just on Twitter and YouTube at the moment.
Okay, cool. And it is at just at no, it's not at distant origins. It's still your
It's
endeavor.
not at no, it's at Endeavour's Wake on Twitter.
Okay. Yeah,
The
mine's the
name
same.
is
Like
different though.
I started Twitter before I started Nikkianajones, so it's like an old podcast name that I had and I can't
Yeah.
change it, so whatever.
I have considered restarting a new Twitter account. I'm waiting for that to grow, but then it's like I can't be bothered.
See, I think about that, but then you lose like you have to start your followers from ground
Yeah,
zero, blah, whatever.
I was thinking about running them both concurrently until I get everybody who's following me now to transfer to that new account. But as I say, it just seems a lot of work.
That is a smart way to go about it.
Mm.
Yeah, at the
I
beginning
might do
when I
that
started
sometime in the
Twitter,
future.
I followed everybody and their mama's dog. I was like, I don't know. I was just like, I would follow so many people and it would be like, you can't follow any more people. And I'd be like, oh. And I'd wait a couple minutes and then I'd follow more people. Like I didn't know what I was doing or how the thing worked. And then now
Yeah,
I think I spend more time unfollowing people than anything. Yeah, because I
I
got too
can't say
many.
I have the same problem, but I'm very cautious about who I follow in the first place. So
Well,
I always
now I
only,
am, but at the
yeah,
when I first started, I was just like, oh yeah, la 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 la. I didn't know that that's who I was gonna be looking at their feeds all the time of, but
well, I had a bit of training because this isn't my first Twitter account either. I did have another one where I discussed things like politics and the like. I ended up deleting that because politics is just it's not a very nice thing to talk about these days. It's just so polarizing and yeah, it's
it is very
not well constructed.
polarizing, and it's like it's interesting too because the thing to always remember about politics, I remember this from like in high school. I I remember I would get kind of invested in an idea or something, and then you realize like your investment doesn't usually change anything on the result of what happens one way or the other. And I mean, maybe if you want to go get into local government and do something else, do sure. But otherwise, I kind of feel like a lot of times we we give away a lot of our energy towards this thing that is the result of it's going to be what it's going to be regardless of whether
Yeah.
you had your energy heightened there or not.
Well,
So
I've been a member of four different political parties here in Britain, so and it's I don't think I've ever achieved a damn thing doing it. So
like you mean like you actively went to like meetings and stuff like that?
yeah, went to party meetings. I'd help certain people try and get elected. One time, we're actually a member of while living in Leeds, or a member of the Conservative Party, but I went and helped Labour fight in a neighbouring town called Bradford because they were up against a not very nice, the word somewhat hard right wing party. Um, the name escapes me at the moment, but yeah, they weren't a very nice bunch. So I actually went and worked for what were basically the opposition party to the party I was a member of, just so we could kick out them.
Cool. So you've been on both sides of the fence then.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, there
but
you go.
I must admit neither side really suited me. I'd be like, I agree with you on that. I agree with you on that, but most of it I disagree with both of you.
Yeah. I guess I kind of realized they were one side of the same coin when I was like I remember when I was I think when I was about 18, I kind of remember thinking like that's when the George W. Bush first got in office when I was 18 and I was like and I kind of stepped back and looked at everything and then I watched how 9/11 all went down and all that stuff and I was like this is all bullshit. All of it anarchy. That's like not. I was just like, this is not. I don't know. Whatever we got going on here is, it's it's not cool. So
Yeah.
and I still kind of feel like that. I kind of feel like it's all, um, well, it's neither here nor there. But anyway, we are now we're dealing with something completely different though, or even if we aren't dealing with, now we know and now we can see that we are dealing with something that's more global than localized countries.
Yeah, and it's very hard for an individual person to get involved in that because it just seems so big with it being absolutely everywhere.
Yep. Where do you get involved with that? I mean, unless you just kind of, you know, start taking back local power and, you know, like
Yeah.
try to get into your township or whatever and try to be like, yeah, we're not following these things. We're going to be doing this stuff instead. I don't know. I don't know. It's gonna definitely be an interesting. We're gonna get to see the world go through. Like, do we want to have one world order or do we want to not? That's what we're gonna have to. We're gonna get to
Yeah,
witness that.
that's the way we're heading, where that question needs answering. I believe, in a way, that's kind of like where this argument stems from. We're already having that discussion, but we haven't noticed it yet.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I agree with that. I think that that's essentially um that's what we need to change it to, like, because that's what it really is, and we're just not saying it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very much so.
All right, Paul. That was
Yeah,
interesting. That was a good one. Okay, I'll put everything up here, and yeah, so it was good having you on.
it was great being on. I've been watching your channel for so long and never thought I'd actually end up being on it. So
Oh,
this has been great.
wow. Okay.
No problem.
Well, it's been a pleasure. We'll talk to you again soon.
Marvelous. Thank you.
Bye.
All right. Bye, everyone.